success. I am Karen Welsh. I'm the VP of Clinical and Reimbursement Excellence with Functional Pathways. And we're going to be talking today with George Douaire, the CEO of Stride Tech Medical. We're going to talk about all things product and senior living and how we can help people prevent falls and where we're heading in technology from that direction. So this is just going to be a nice little conversation about that, and super excited to have George on today. Welcome, George.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Great. You want to give a little background about yourself, where you've been, where you're going?
Well, it's been a long and winding road. I mean, let's see. I guess the best place is to start where I am today and then kind of go backwards in time as far as you think is appropriate. I'm, as you mentioned, the CEO of a company that is now making attachments to walkers that detect people's posture and their position relative to their walker so that they can use it more safely and try to prevent falls. I found them when I was mentoring at an accelerator here in Boulder. We're in Boulder, Colorado, and I was also I'm adjunct at University of Colorado Boulder, and so I just kind of had been in that space, semi-retired. Because before that, I had done a lot of different things. Corporate-wise, I've worked for a couple Fortune 50s. Was a senior vice president at a Fortune 50 on a global level for marketing and general e-business principles. I had also done an internet marketing roll-up, and then before that, I was involved with a company that was a startup out of Chicago. After 12 years in the media business. When I was at that company, I was kind of charged with a portion of strategic investments because the newspaper business wanted to understand how they were going to be disintermediated by technology. And so we invested in, we started looking at these companies, and one of them was a company called Peapod. And Peapod was the first online grocery order and delivery company. And we started that. I got involved with that company in 1989 when we were still using modems to connect to the internet, and there was the nice World Wide Web, the what you see is what you get kind of approach. It was all DOS based. So I've been around technology for a really long time, aging myself, hopefully gracefully, but it's been an interesting thing to watch how everything has changed. And now we walk around with phones that have as much computing power as rooms full of computers did back in the day. I laugh, my stepkids always, and my kids laugh at me because when I started programming in college, we used to, having a paperclip was a really valuable thing because you used it to punch holes in the cards.
Exactly. Actually, my birth announcement, this will date me. My dad was a computer programmer and IT and taught computer programming. And my birth announcement was on a dot matrix card that's in a pink card that said it's a girl with all holes in it. Yeah. So that dates me slightly.
Well, at least it was your dad doing it, not you. I was doing that.
Right. I didn't bring that up, George. You did. So why senior living? Why get into a DME kind of product line?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, really, it was because I wanted to do something good to help people. My mother's now passed. I'd seen her fall while using a walker. And that's a life-changing experience, not only for obviously my mom and what she went through, and just seeing the fear in her eyes and the concerns she had while the fall was taking place. It was kind of in slow motion. One of those, fortunately, wasn't a catastrophic fall, but it changed everyone in the family's life. Suddenly it's 24/7 care, and figuring out how to be around, but that's just also the latent worry that I experienced. And then when you start to look at the number of people who are using mobility devices, and you start to think about and understand how many people are impacted by these kinds of events, and if we can do something that uses technology to help people be safer in their mobility, there are three really important things that come out of that. One is the safety of the person using the walker. The other is the joy that they can experience still by using and being more mobile, going to kids' graduations or parties, or just going down to play cards or a meal. If we can avoid the isolation that comes with, I'm a little bit too worried or it's too hard to get up and go do something. And then the third piece is the family members and the grandkids who want to see people, and the kids, themselves, or just family and friends. And if we can help make it so that there's a higher level of quality of life for everybody, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the joy, the little moments. Joy comes in the little moments, right? It's not the big events, it's the little events, or the events, the anticipation of the big event. And if we can make it so all those things can work, or we can play a small part in that, that's a contribution I think that's really valuable.
Well, I think it's important to talk about that fear of falling, and then also the equipment that is out there that patients now and residents can now just go out and buy anywhere. You don't even have to have it delivered by a physical therapist or occupational therapist or even a physician anymore. So you can go out and get a rollator, you can go out and get a walker, a cane, a splint, all those kind of things. So I think stepping back away from that a little bit and talking a little bit about the importance of therapy intervention and ensuring that you're using whatever equipment that you purchase on your own as a resident, and I experienced that firsthand with my parents. My mom went out and bought my dad a rollator. Not appropriate for him, but she thought she wanted to keep him safe from falling. But the same holds true for equipment and DME of, yes, you may feel safer, which is great. And we know that all of the research shows that fear of falling can actually make you fall more because you're hesitant and you're tensed up and your fear makes it worse. Yep. So taking some of that fear away, but there still needs to be some kind of level of caution, especially if you aren't including a physical therapist or an OT involved in your care, or get them involved in your care when you do bring something like that into your life, to make sure that you are using it as safely as possible. Because if you're not, which is the whole reason for Stride Tech, right, is to make sure that the equipment that you're using as safely as possible to continue to prevent falls. Yeah,
it's so often, when we speak with the folks that we've been working with, where'd you get your walker or your rollator? And I think it's something
Walmart.
Or they got it from Uncle Jim's attic. It was a hand-me-down, and it's not set up properly. The number of times you see, I mean, the payer system, we can get into a whole conversation there about whether or not the equipment that's being provided through Medicare or Medicaid is appropriate. And, just the wheel size. I was setting up a unit just the other day for a friend or on a customer's walker, and the wheels on this thing were terrific, right? And not the small ones that can, if you're putting a lot of pressure on it and trying to get out of a chair, they slide, or God forbid the brake slips, or you forgot to lock it. There are so many different things that people need to be aware of. And like you said about the research, the number of people who fall because they weren't trained properly, or the walker's not set up right. When I first got into this space, I didn't know, and you can tell me if this is correct or not, but you're supposed to be able to walk around with a rollator by using 2 fingers on the top of it and just guiding it around, not putting your weight on the arms. Every time I ever have gotten on a rollator, the first thing I do is I put my heavy arms lean on it, and that puts me at risk. If I was really using this for my mobility, that puts me at risk. And our device measures the weight that someone's placing on the handles, and it also measures the distance of a person's body from the frame, because you often see people all hunched over. Well, that's a risk. And so how can we train folks to not be in that kind of position? And we do that through 2 ways. One is the handles have sensors in them that measure that weight, but they also vibrate, kind of like a cell phone on silent. And so it's not a very, it's not alarm bells going off, and it's just a nice little buzz in your hands, and it will remind you to step into the frame. The other way we do it is with an LED light that goes from green, if you're doing it right, to red. Whoop, you got to make sure you step into it.
I'm pretty sure I was in the red almost the whole entire time when you and I met.
Yeah.
I was in the red and it was vibrating a lot until I figured out the appropriate way, but it's great feedback.
But it also what you need, maybe we didn't have it set up. I think we were doing it in a demo mode, right? So it was going to an awful lot. But we can change the settings for anybody. I'm 6'2" and weigh 225 pounds, and I'm going to have a different kind of weight need that you need. And so we can make it so it's customizable. It's done on an app, or you can have a physical therapist or occupation or DME store just set it up properly for you. But the other piece of this is that what we found is that once people get used to it, the first couple, 3 days, it buzzes a lot because you're getting used to it. And everybody goes, well, let's see if it buzzes now when I put a lot of weight with my left arm, or move it out, or little things like people said that when they went around the corner, they move the walker around because you got to navigate that door. Well, when you do that, you're actually at risk because you're not in the frame. And so how to train, and what we found was that because we collect data, we're able to collect data, share it, that in 4 days' time, the number of alerts that people received went down by 94%.
Wow.
And then they got down to a level, and it's usually around 10, 12% of the time that they're using it, they get alerts. And that's based on whatever malady or infirmity or issue that somebody may have. You just can't get better than that. But to know that you're doing the best you can, it just makes an incredible difference in people's life. And that's the fun part.
Well, and fall prevention is such a huge topic in the industry right now, and I think will continue to be. And I know there's tons and tons of technology out there as far as fall detection. But I think fall prevention, yes, we want to detect a fall if it happens, right? Yep. But I want to do something as a therapist, and granted, I'm a speech therapist, but still therapist. I want to prevent that from happening. But there's certain things that you're not going to be able to do. And one of the things that I think is cool about Stride Tech and some of the other technologies as well is the ability to have it be the therapist when the therapist isn't there.
Yes.
And that's the challenge, is that carryover, because they may be with us in therapy for 45 minutes to an hour, right, each day, or maybe 3 times a week or twice a week if they're an outpatient. Well, who's watching them? Who's helping them give that feedback or that biofeedback when we're not there? Yeah. So, and we know technology is huge nowadays, and AI is going to take over the world, right? I think by 2050 is what it said in the news, that humans will be extinct by 2050.
Oh, no.
So we're going to have to train robots how to walk, apparently. But being able to be that eyes and ears and everything else on that resident to keep them safe when we're not there, or when the nurse isn't there, when the family's not there, those kind of things.
That's a really important piece of what we've been hearing. And I just, again, with this setup the other day, heard a user doesn't want to have me. My mom didn't want, mom, step into the frame. Mom, you're leaning back. Mom. I'm a nag. I was a nag, and I don't want to be a pain, but I wanted her to be safe. And that's it. So this tool can actually be a relationship preservation tool as well, not only for family members, but for therapists. We've had folks that are therapists that have used it and said, it's really nice because they, you hear something and go like this so many times, but when the machine says, hey, you're out of the thresholds that you established, it reinforces it independently and takes that negative piece of the training or the nagging out of the equation.
So how important is it from your perspective to make, whether it's Stride Tech or any other piece of equipment or technology or whatever that is, how important is it for the generation that we're talking about? And I'm not saying they're not savvy as far as using their phones, their computers, those kind of things, but certainly not 8-year-old next door that I can hand my phone to and he fixes it in 2 seconds.
Right.
And I'm like, is that even a phone anymore? Because I feel like you just made it a rocket ship. Right. But taking that into consideration, that we know that there are some gaps from a technology savvy thought process, how important is it to make technology as accessible and easy to use as possible for this generation. I know you've gone out and tested these and used these and set them up. What has the feedback been about ease of use, and how important is that?
And you can speak about this outside of just StrideTech in general terms.
Right.
If people can't use it, they're not going to use it. So it has to be absolutely where the consumer is. And what's really interesting about the dynamic, I'm at the tail end of the boomer generation. And my level of technological expertise, based on the fact that I've been in this field in technology for such a long time, is very different than than a friend who's 75 years old. And I think it's difficult to say, and paint in a broad brush. You got to just meet people where they are. And it starts from the design. How big are the buttons? I mean, I've got meat hooks, trying to get little buttons, it's not good. And can you imagine when their arthritis kicks in or something like that, it's going to make it even more challenging. As well as okay, so we use an app to do the setup for our device. Well, we also know that not everybody has a phone that is going to be Bluetooth enabled and that allows you to do that. So we have a way, I think that, we didn't do that when we did the demonstration that you saw, that if you just turn this on and put it into the setup mode and walk for 30 seconds, it will automatically read where your body is and it will set it up for you. So it's customizable based there. Now, when you get better and you don't want the thing buzzing all the time, or you let's say I've stubbed my toe and I need to have more reminders, you can change the settings with this app. Now that can be done by a family member, it can be done by a physical therapist, and it can be done by the user if they have the capability of connecting that way. And again, it's one of those things where, to whom are we marketing this kind of a tool? Some of the folks we've tested with were like, well, I'm never going to pay for something like this, because they had, a Medicare issued walker, the two-wheel rollator with the skids, and it's a $45 walker. And then you look at this kind of thing and say, wow, it's $200. That's awfully a lot when you think of it relative to the cost of the walker. Then you take another look at it and you say, well, relative to the cost of a fall,
exactly,
is it worth that investment? And again, this thing attaches to all those walkers, so it's any kind of walker that you have, it'll work on it. But the technological piece of it comes into is just an attachment, and someone can set it up for you. So to make it, because it's got to be easy. Some of the folks and the R&D folks that I work with in these big companies, at the end of the day, my rule of thumb was my mom. That's my mom. If my mom can't use it, it ain't going to get used.
Right, exactly. Yeah, my parents are the same way, and most of the residents and patients that we work with, if it's not accessible enough to them and you can't make it where they understand it, or they don't feel like it's a hindrance to them,
right,
and it's not scary to them as well, then typically it will work. So from a technology perspective, where do you see fall prevention, which is what I would put the StrideTech in,
absolutely,
fall prevention in 10 years?
Oh gosh, what StrideTech's going to be able to do?
We're just fall prevention technology. Let's take StrideTech out of it and just talk about the fall prevention technology.
It's such a huge area of opportunity. Again, to the point you made before, if we can be prophylactic, if we can get out in front of and prevent something from happening, it's huge. Right now, age 65 plus, the cost on an annual basis of falls is over $101 billion every year to the U.S. healthcare system.
That's billion with a B.
With a B. And the walker side of that is about $2.5 billion every year. And those numbers are only increasing because the numbers are increasing, right? The cost is going to get more because there are more of us getting closer to 65.
And there are less caregivers.
And there are fewer, they're harder to get folks to help. So technology is going to play a big part of that. I've been at different shows and met with different founders and different folks that are creating suites of opportunities. Not everybody wants to have a camera in their house.
Right.
And the intrusiveness of it. Well, there's motion detectors. And there are different ways of it. What about taking medication and pills? There are all these different things where you can sense whether or not it's been open, and it can inform not only the family members, but the healthcare providers.
Right.
Our little device can tell the difference between how much weight's being placed on a left hand or a right hand. Those are important things because something physical, if something happens to your left arm, what does that mean otherwise? And we can let you know, and you can intervene to help, or see if there's a problem. There's going to be so much advancement. It's kind of like, Moore's law with computing, storage, and space and capabilities that I think we'll see doubling and tripling of the capabilities over the next 10 years. And I don't think it will be intrusive. I think it will be something that people will rely on. How often do you use talk to text now instead of typing? I mean, I'm doing it for emails, and now I don't, as you mentioned, AI is going to do it for me in my voice, in the way that, in the style that I communicate. While I find
it's a little scary.
It's a little scary.
Some respects.
But it's really cool too, right? I mean,
right.
Now you walk in and you can tell your Google Home or Alexa to turn on the lights, so you don't have, if you got your bags full of cans full of groceries. Those kind of things, I think life's going to get better as a result of it, and it should free. I'm an optimist in regard to the use of technology making and improving our lives. There are obviously downsides. When I teach, I mean, I can't believe the kids are really adept at using their thumbs, but when it comes to writing a paper and using proper grammar and punctuations, sometimes it's a little bit surprising that they're not doing the same things that we were taught.
Right. Or you walk into a restaurant and nobody's having a conversation anymore. They're texting each other around the table.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
You scan the menu with a QR code. But these things are also, they're helpful things, but like anything else, moderation in all things. And you can hand it to a kid and they can fix something in 15 minutes, where you and I are reading manuals or going and Googling to figure out how to. But the fact that Googling is a verb and part of our lives now, you got a question, you Google it.
Right. So from a regulatory perspective.
Interesting. Good question.
Because we are one of the most, well, I think actually we are the most regulated industry. The nursing home industry is the most heavily regulated.
Right.
And for pretty decent reason, although I think sometimes the regulation ties our hands in ways that when we don't have the staff and we don't have, I'm not advocating for anything less than excellent care for sure. But when you're tied to paper and having to fill out forms and do everything away from the resident, it takes, when your hands are like this or your hands are on a book, they're not on a resident or a patient. So from a regulatory perspective, how does that work from a device industry? Yeah.
So, and I'll speak specifically about StrideTech and then go to the writ large. We're an attachment to a Class 1 medical device, so we are actually not regulated by the FDA because we don't change the properties of the walker. Okay, and so that stays intact. When it comes to any regulation, getting a little bit philosophical here and not in a political way of thinking about things, but companies are designed to maximize profits. And if we are left, not me specifically, but generally, left to our own devices, we're going to do things as cheaply as possible and get as much money for that item. And manufacturing, all those things. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and if they didn't have the Clean Water Act, the Chicago River, where I grew up, was a sewer. And the same thing with some of the rivers around us. And now they're not. And there are beautiful, river walks in the Chicago area now. It's unimaginable from the times that when I was a kid. Regulation has to be balanced, and it has to take and so that's the one side of the company side. The other side of it is you can have so much bureaucracy that it stymies growth and it suppresses things happening. So there's got to be a middle ground. There's got to be a balance. It's a pendulum, I think. It typically, companies go too far, regulation comes in, and they go too far, and then it swings back towards the middle. And when you're in a place, especially with technology, look at Rule 230 with the social media companies, and I mean, they're not responsible for any of the content that's out there because it was designed at that time, because they were a delivery platform. Well, it's a little different today because you can't see where things are going to be 10 years from now because so much changes so fast. So we have to have good communication. I think that I've been involved with some of the different things that are taking place here in Colorado and meeting with legislators and trying to get into the advocacy groups and make sure that everybody understands, because at the end of the day, we want everyone to be safe.
Right.
If I make something that's cheap and a lot of people buy it, but it harms them, well, I should be regulated heavily. Right. So how do you balance those things?
Do you see a time when technology maybe doesn't replace, but certainly lessens the need for physician assessment, physical therapy assessment, and that actual human eyeball to, assess a patient?
I mean, I think augment is ideally the best way, and enhance, right? We can collect data that shows that George's left arm is now leaning more heavily. Or we can take a look at George's time of use and find out that, gosh, he's getting up an awful lot at night. What could be the reason behind that? And then the caregiver can look into that and help. I think that it's so important to have everything, again, in balance. COVID, obviously the horrible things that everybody went through there, but then there's the fact that we're doing this on our computers. I just recently had a call with my doctor that was done this way as opposed to waiting 3 months for the appointment. And because she didn't need to have hands-on, but it was a lot better to communicate this way. So again, I think it's really more about making sure that things are in balance properly and using the tools. If you rely too much one way, it's going to cause problems.
So you mentioned data.
Yeah.
Which there's lots of it out there now and easily accessible to everyone. Now, whether it's accurate data is a different conversation, right? So thoughts on, because we get data from every piece of technology out there, right? Every piece of technology gives some kind of data. How do you approach knowing which data you really need? Because sometimes it's too much.
Yeah, we've just had these kinds of conversations because we collect millions and millions of data points on people. And we had one test where we were with, we had 15 folks. We had 50 million data records on them. Now, that's because we collect the data on a second by second basis. Is that pertinent? Is it germane to the conversation? And figuring those pieces out. I think what you have, and that comes back to your comment about AI and artificial intelligence and machine learning and the capabilities that represents to take these huge sets of data and discern patterns and understand. Because really what my hope for our technology is that we'll get to the point where we can be predictive. George has got a lot of extra weight going on his left-hand side there, and it can automatically alert somebody or can provide that information to the healthcare provider. We're not going to make that decision about somebody's care, but we want to be able to inform people properly. So I think that the big piece about it is getting good data, garbage in, garbage out, right? So you got to make sure you get good data. And our conversations and the different things that we've been talking about, doing things like what we've found in our testing is that when we did some pre and post testing with folks, and we found that once the alerts went way down and they were feeling safer, guess what they did? They used their walker more. And when we tested to see how they did against typical mobility tests like timed up and go or balance tests, we found that people's scores improved because they were moving more. It's the old move it or lose it. Use it or How does that
Same
go
thing,
again?
same concept.
Use
Same
it or lose
concept.
it.
Move it or lose it, use it or lose it. Yeah, same thing.
And so then that tells us, that kind of helps guide the direction of the data we collect. One of the things we'll do with StrideTech is I want to have it so that on a phone, so when I get to the point where I'm using a mobility device, my kids will get alerts if I've had a fall, or if they can see how I'm doing instead of asking, did you go for a walk today, Dad? They'll know. But also the reverse of that is true. If, I know what my personal experience was, and others have told us as well. The concern is, did mom get up today? Did mom start moving today? And if the phone hasn't alerted you that dad got up by 10 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, it sends you alert, and then you can say, hey, Dad, what's going on?
Right.
Those kinds of things are all designed and will enhance people's lives. And that's where I think technology and the artificial intelligence, machine learning can take us.
Well, I think outcomes are so incredibly important, and being able, not just for us as providers or technology, DME, whatever that is, it's all about the outcomes and making sure that our residents are improving or at least maintaining, right? We don't want them to backslide.
Right.
And making sure that we have that insight into that. And we have Right Track on our side that is our outcomes tracking tool, all connected to standardized assessments and GG on the MDS for SNPs. But it's so powerful when the patient and the family and the caregivers all have that same information. And they know exactly where that patient is in time, right? So that, hey, we can all be on the same page. You know what? They're walking just fine. The problem now is putting their pants on, or picking something up off the floor, or doing 4 steps to get up into the house. But being able to have that insight, to me, that's what's exciting about technology, is the better way to share the data, but ensuring that it's controlled data that isn't fake news.
Well, it's so, if I, you see it in different places, and everybody's got their own personal experiences with these things. But like, I was an officer of a publicly traded company, and I've done small family business things. And what I've learned is simultaneous distribution of all useful information is vitally important. Nobody can say I didn't know this, because you got it. Now, did you look at it? That's a whole different question, but at least the information was there. But that gets to your point too about what's the important piece of information. So to me, it may be about, is dad up and moving around? And to you, it may be looking at something that's different about balance, or, and so we have different metrics that we're looking at, or ways that we measure success. But at least that information's there so that someone can point to it. And you see all these different things where you've got the digital medical records that are available to folks, and that has made a huge difference. I can see what my test scores were, and did they go up or down? And to make informed decisions easier. And the doctor, the professional, the physical therapist, the person who knows, but you see this thing here, that's a flag we got to watch.
Right.
And does that go up or down?
Well, and sometimes residents don't even know what's a flag. Just when you look, even if you just look at StrideTech, they didn't know that leaning on the walker wasn't a good thing. They didn't know that having it all the way out in front, again, being that eyes and ears when the trained staff aren't available or the caregivers aren't available, I think makes just such a huge difference. And I think your key word was that adjunct, or that enhancement of, it's not a replacement, but it's certainly an adjunct and an enhancement.
It's about building out the team, and as you pointed out, with the number of folks that are available, right? It's hard to get people to be around, and to have 24/7 care where they, even with 24/7 care, are their eyes on all the time. They can't. Right. I mean, one of the challenges that's really been fascinating to learn about in this field is regarding mobility devices. And I saw it a little bit with my mom. Did you use the walker to go to the bathroom at night? We're only as good as if you use the tool.
Right. Right. Well, my grandmother had a cane, and she hooked it over her arm and walked around with it. It never touched the ground, but it was there. It made her feel better because she was carrying. If you asked her, do you have your cane? She could honestly say yes. We asked it the wrong way. Are you using your cane?
Yeah. And to be fair to both sides of the equation here, while we have all these concerns, and while my father-in-law may not want to hear about our concerns, we also have to be so mindful and respectful of the desire to live in their homes and to remain independent without burdening them with our concerns and worries.
Right.
And if we can help them help us and our anxiety, that just helps everybody. Again, the rising tide lifts all the boats. And if we can make everybody work better together, with the team being, patient-centric, right? I mean, that's such a key element of care today, is making it so that, Joe is in charge of his care, but everybody else is able to benefit from that, but also inform the decisions that Joe is making.
Right. Well, and I think that's where that health information interoperability and the increased focus on that, both from CMS and from all the other health entities, is so incredibly important, because it's been so siloed for since its existence, and now being able to have that interoperability certainly helps all of us help the residents age in place for as long as possible, thrive in place for as long as possible, which is what we all want.
Everybody.
And we want it for ourselves when we get there too, right?
Because we're all seniors in training, right? We're all, and so we've got it, and we want to get out in front of it as much as you can. One of the challenges with regulation and CMS and all these other entities, it's really hard to turn a battleship on a dime, or a super tanker on a dime. It takes a long time, and it tends to be reactive, and people don't start to understand the implications of something until they've experienced it themselves.
Right.
Navigating insurance. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm able to take Medicare, but when I do, I understand that's a labyrinth that's really challenging to try to figure out how to go about doing it. And, why can't we make things easier? And that's what technology is supposed to do. It's supposed to do the hard, repetitive tasks and make them simpler.
Totally agree. Anything else you'd like to share today before we wrap it up?
Oh, I'm delighted to have the conversation. And what I found, this is a new field for me for the last 4 years. And what I have been absolutely stunned by is the wonderful people that are involved in this space, because we all have the goal of making lives better. And when you start to see that and understand that, and everybody is a little hesitant to adopt new change because it's something different, but if we can get the industry to think a little bit ahead and to try things, we have to take the risk profile down a little bit so that we can and help effectuate that change more rapidly for folks who need it.
Agreed. Well, I can tell you, I greatly appreciate the passion that you show for the residents that we all serve in this industry. And, it's a passion and a calling for me as well. I've been in it my whole career and can't imagine being anywhere else, but definitely grateful to have your passion and insight to take care of the residents that we really love so dearly. So,
gosh, Dave, the lives and the experiences that they have, and what we can learn from folks, if we just take a moment and listen, and if we can make it so that they can live their lives and get to us, and we can interact with them, be it in a lunchroom or around a card table, gosh, that's the best thing I can do.
Exactly. Well, George, thanks so much for your time today. Greatly appreciate the conversation, and I know we'll talk again soon, but thanks for all you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for what you're doing too. It takes all of us.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thanks, George. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.